welcome to NewJerseyBusinessStars.net, an initiative created where we seek out local business leaders throughout New Jersey and communities and bring them in and sit down and talk with them to learn their story, their backstory, their journeys, just, what had made them this New Jersey business star they are today. So, hello, my name is Cora Park. I'm the founder of NewJerseyBusinessStars.net, and I'm also the CEO and president of Diamond Business Communications. We're a technology company that services small, medium-sized businesses throughout New Jersey and the metro area. And today I'm super excited because our New Jersey business star is Brenda Ross-Dulan. Okay, she is the CEO and founder of Ross-Dulan Group, which is a organization consulting firm, which you're going to learn all about. But what I'm focusing on today is have the journey. Welcome, Brenda. Please introduce yourself and give our audience the back history. Who is Brenda Ross-Dulan? And, what is this journey that has brought you here today?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I am the managing principal and CEO of the Ross-Dulan Group. I describe us as a boutique strategy consulting firm. Our mantra is we transform companies by transforming decision makers. So you wonder, where did that mantra come from? Well, it came from the notion aligning my own personal mission to a business mission. I fundamentally believe that my life is about changing people's lives and leaving them better off. What better way to impact businesses than to transform those people who are charged with leading those businesses? So connecting with the leaders, making those leaders better leaders so that ultimately the company and the employees are better off. So our focus as a strategy consulting firm actually was born out of the idea that I wanted to take what was over 25 years in financial services, not just talking about the academics of it, but someone who's actually lived in that seat, who had run various businesses, who've actually started businesses and business units, turned around, restructured, gone through 5 different mergers, actually run
one of the largest
ones in financial services history. And when you and I met actually through was the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber of Commerce, that actually preceded my move. What preceded that was my move from the West Coast to the East Coast. So I started my banking career after getting my MBA from UCLA.
Okay.
I started in what was a sort of a predecessor to Wells Fargo, which was First Interstate Bank. I was a bank analyst. I was a commercial real estate. I did community development, and then found myself in consumer banking right at the time that Wells Fargo and Wachovia, I would say, merged, or Wells Fargo actually acquired Wachovia during the financial services crisis. So upon going through all of that and then leading what was the New Jersey, I would say, transformation of Wachovia into Wells Fargo, I later developed the team, ran what was $13 billion business, over 1,700 team members, over $500 million in revenue, and learned sort of the nuts and bolts of how do you lead a team, how do you go through crisis, how do you uncover what are issues with customers and the like, and taking that to advise other leaders on how to make better decisions.
And I can only imagine that through this journey and all these different experiences, you've been involved in different vantage points for chairs at the table, seats at the table, if you will.
Absolutely.
Different types of leaders.
Absolutely.
And, how they made those decisions. I can imagine this has cultivated you to, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or you can see the triggers.
Right.
As you mentioned, I think you,
right.
The emotional side of it, there's 2 steps. If you could repeat that for us, I think that was a great, there's to making decisions, there's...
Yeah, decision making isn't just an academic exercise. It really is, there's an emotional side of it too. And having sat in the seat, I understand that when someone gives you advice, sometimes they give you advice being somewhat disconnected from what it feels like to actually execute that advice that they've given you.
Okay.
So what the Ross-Dulan Group does, through my experiences and the team of people that I may bring on to help us with various assignments, is that we're not just executive coaches, right? We're people who've sat in a seat. We've made the decisions. We've had the successes. We've had the failures, right? We understand what it's like when we say do something that may be difficult to be done out of the box, right? And I also understand that decision making has two pieces to it. There's an emotional piece. There's an academic piece. The emotional piece gets you back to helping leaders understand that why you make a decision sometimes can be much more important than the actual decision itself. Why is fundamentally more important than what? And I'll tell you an example. I had a client, and it was a board development client. So we do, I would say we specialize in a couple of things. One, around leadership team effectiveness. We work primarily in the C-suite. The companies that we primarily work with are the mid to larger companies. Mm-hmm. How do you actually bring a team of leaders together to effectively lead the company? Right.
Role.
We do executive coaching. We also do executive advisory work. We do succession planning. We do board development. All of the things that point to effective decision making that ultimately impacts the success of the team and of the company itself. So I'll give you an example of a recent assignment on board development. Talking to a company, we kind of rolled out what was what we thought were the kinds of things that needed to be done in order for this board of directors to be effective.
Why
right?
are we doing
right? So we had a set of, there was sort of 4 different criteria. What's the board composition? What's the board culture like? What clarity do we have around common understanding of where this company is actually going? What kinds of processes, how effective is this board? So it's like these 4 different things that we look at. Came back, we said, do this, do this, do this, and the other. So the board actually, got so focused on the details of the actions that needed to be taken and somewhat overwhelmed by the steps that need to be taken, that they lost sight of why they were doing it.
Okay.
Why becomes much more effective towards influencing the success of a strategy than what you're doing. If I get bogged down with the steps, sometimes I can become so overwhelmed that I forget why this is important. Ultimately, I may tell you that you need to fix this particular committee, broadly speaking. Well, why is that important? It's important because if I don't fix this committee, then this board ultimately is not going to function effectively. Board doesn't function effectively, there's no success, there's no support for the CEO. CEO doesn't function effectively, there's no support for the C-suite, and C-suite doesn't function effectively.
Answer the why, right?
Why is so fundamentally important. What makes companies successful in many instances is that they have a rubric and they have a certain set of sort of steps and routines that make them effective for consistency. If they don't always continuously revisit the why, then those steps can become misaligned. That's why you get a breakdown in culture.
Okay.
That's why you wake up one day and then you're in the newspaper, right? Because something didn't go right. Not because you didn't understand your why, but you didn't keep revisiting how those steps align with your why and whether or not there is misalignment.
That is so on point with even setting like quarterly initiatives, quarterly goals, or the whole the roadmap in itself. Start out with the why. This is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're building those initiatives, do you think it would be important to, as you're writing, because it does require tasks, to every time you write those tasks, answer the why question, have that why as the mantra
And
for the culture of the company.
And revisiting that, this is what's so fun. One of the things that I've learned, particularly in the large corporations, there's always a question, so, well, why do I need a consultant? I've got all these smart people in the company. Well, those smart people in that company are wired to think a certain way because the culture of the company is that way, right? And even when every year when internally they come together for a strategic planning session, it's the same mindset. We all kind of think alike, and we're gonna brainstorm around these new things that we're going to do, but everybody is in that same mindset. What you need to do constantly is to bring in new thinking, a new perspective, an outside perspective, to challenge and to examine whether or not your processes, your approach are aligned with that purpose. Because you could still in your heart feel the same way. You could still have, but somehow this process really doesn't align, and ultimately it takes you off course.
I can see that, and that's such a bold statement. And also going into those quarterly sessions, as you say, where they're meeting, do you find that maybe they are just getting too complacent to just check the box? Okay, we're here to do something without the vision, and that's probably some of the reason you do need this strategic guidance and consulting, because they're not getting the results they should be.
Sometimes the urgency of the moment, right? And sometimes the to-do list starts to guide where we spend our time. And if you are at an executive level, your job isn't just to get the job done, it's also to see where you need to go. And one of the things that I learned, in particular, is particularly after I left corporate America and then launched the consulting practice, is that when you call someone and you want to get on their schedule, they usually will make time for you to get on that schedule because it fits a list of things that they actually have to get done. If it's not something that's on their priority list to get done, they're not going to see you, or they're going to keep rescheduling.
Okay.
If you're going to be an effective leader, executive, you've got to not just get the things done that are on the table, but also make time to be creative and to think and to be open to those ideas that will allow you to challenge the thinking and to take the company to new levels. If you are only seeing what's in the box,
Right.
if you come in the room and I see Cora and I see Brenda,
Right.
that's all I get. I never ever get an opportunity to see what's beyond there, to even elevate my company to the next level.
Growth by letting, opening a door to,
Yeah.
spawn out.
Right,
And grow
right.
that particular,
Yeah.
or new things.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's not to say that the academics of the business aren't important. So one of the things that we do bring to the table actually is P&L experience, right? Compliance experience. We understand the
financial
rigors of the
background.
financial background, right? How do you actually lead teams? Those types of things that are fundamentally important. What I
Financial
find,
product metric.
those things usually aren't the things that are lacking.
So the policies are in place. It's
Revisiting those, right, and making sure that there's a rigor around. And what I would say is that you almost have to build a process in that essentially guarantees that your thinking will be challenged. That's a tough thing, right? Because repetition comes from the idea that we all kind of believe the same thing, and there's some sustainability because we're all aligned with that, and so we keep going. But what happens if what you're doing is out of step?
It feels good, but it's out of step, right?
It's out of step, right? This is what happens when you're in a room, and have you ever been in a room and then there's a commercial on TV. And it is the most offensive commercial you've ever heard, you've ever seen. But you wonder, who in, well,
How did that get created?
how did that get, who was in the
Who
room?
let that out?
Who made that decision?
Right.
How did that happen?
Right.
That's because everybody in that room, there becomes a group think, right? We all sort of see things the same way. We're all using the same rubric, right? We're evaluating things the same way.
Looks good.
Right? But somehow we didn't examine our blind spots, right? Who's not in the room that should have been in the room, right? How did things shift from the time that I came in the room, from the time, from when before I came in the room and now that I'm in the room? Has the world shifted? Did I start engaging in a conversation with someone, not realizing that the person just drove through a flood just to come see me, right? Because here's where I am. So this is another thing that can cause issues with leaders, and that is examining your blind spots. What are your blind spots?
These are brilliant, eyes, okay, and tips. Not just tips, but experience, and I wish I had all day, you know what I mean? Because I could sit here I'm going to watch this several times over, but a lot of things I like to just wrap up with the audience too is, how do you keep it all on track? You sit on all these boards, you're running this business, you're talking to different leaders, so each project, each client is a relationship in itself. How do you get it all done?
Yeah.
In 30 minutes or less, no, 30 seconds or less, right? Is there an organizational track that you use? That's one of the things we all like to share.
Yeah, I would say, I always go back to purpose. Purpose is a powerful thing. Yeah. Why I do something becomes the first criteria, right, for determining what needs to get done. But I'll be the first one to admit that sometimes it's not until you're in the midst of things that you understand what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. Sometimes you gotta be overwhelmed before you start to streamline, because in my mind sometimes I worry about cutting out stuff that's important, and so it's more of an art than it is a science. But starting with why, and then being realistic, and why, and then also your priorities, then being unapologetic about those things that you can't get done.
That's right. That's some great advice. And what can you tell, or how does these enterprises is the people that would benefit the most? Large companies, enterprise?
We generally work with mid to larger companies. That is primarily our sweet spot, but we're certainly open to talking to any company that might need our services. One of the things that we have learned is that some of the smaller companies understand what we call technical assistance, but really have not really grown an appreciation for strategy and consulting,
emotional and
because because it feels very in the future, and I've got all this stuff on my plate. I don't have time to talk about all this fluffy stuff, right, that you're talking about. So what we did during the financial crisis, during the pandemic, is we understood that the smaller businesses needed to understand not just how to work their business, not to work in their business, but how to work on their business, right?
Coaches are telling me all the time.
Right. So we did create an opportunity that if you go onto our website called the rossdulangroup.com, you could sign up for a virtual strategy session that gives you an opportunity to have a conversation with us about a business issue that's on the table, talking CEO to CEO about something that you can't talk to anybody in your team about, and then figure out whether or not there's an opportunity to engage with us longer term.
Is it a fit?
Yeah, is it a fit? So that for the smaller companies, you can go on our website and do that.
Well, I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome.
I'm so pleased. So it's rossdulan.com, and I would encourage you, if you are an executive or a CEO of a medium to large size business, you need this woman right here, okay? Financial wizardry among everything else. And thank you so much for joining us today, Brenda. I do appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. I could sit here all day. But thank you, everybody, for listening. And if you're a New Jersey business star or you know a New Jersey business star, go to our website, www.newjerseybusinessstars.net, and let's talk. Thank you.